Hello, I'm Regas Sager.
And I'm Deshanel Sager.
And we're Wrecked and Certified. Well, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
We appreciate you joining in, jumping on board with us as we talk about the continuation of what we talked about last time. We were talking about the
blended family
families
coming together like the Brady Bunch that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were doing all that stuff. It was a good conversation. I learned some things about what we talked about, but just a little bit of recap, before we move forward. We were talking about the importance of blended families, and there's so many families out there that are blended. I know I'm blended several times over.
There's so many elements to it
there is.
And we may not cover them all, but we're covering the surface of it. We're touching on the surface of it and just trying to give you a little bit of help and a little bit of guidance to how to get a good start to that and how to become and be a work in progress to be a successful blended family. It may not be all roses and like joy and have happy ending like the Brady Bunch, but we want you to be successful and to have peace and to have harmony and to have love and joy and peace in your home. So that's why we're here talking about this subject because, one, it affects us, and two, it affects so many families in America that it's something that needs to be talked about. And so many times that we don't touch on those issues or we set them aside or we don't get the much needed help that we need into becoming successful families.
Yeah, and to your point there, when you look at being a blended family, sometimes you can have the tendency to kind of brush things aside. It's like, I'm going to let his dad or his mom, her dad take care of that or what have you. And so you have a really strong propensity to just kind of let things ride. But if you want to be successful in life in anything with parenting or a blended family, et cetera, it takes work.
It does, and it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work raising someone else's child to whatever extent that those boundaries are within that household. There is work involved. And I know we were talking on the way here about how a step parent like myself, I'm going to pause right there because before I go there, I just want to make sure that those of you that are watching us today, that we kind of give you a little bit more baseline as to what we talked about. Yes, we talked about blended family. We talked about the child being in the middle between two homes. We talked about all of the craziness that can come along with that. And then we just had a conversation about our beginnings and how we had to bring our two families together. So just to kind of give you a little bit.
And then we ended on bringing that outside spouse in. That baby mama, baby daddy.
Yeah, baby mama, baby daddy, and all that other stuff. Because unfortunately, there's a whole lot of that stuff going on. And so... But back to what I was saying there, I think it's so important. Like I said, myself as a step parent, I think we take on the role of being the good parent because we don't want to rock the boat, right? We want that child to like us. We want that child to embrace us because we're the new, dad or the new man in mom's life or the new dude on the block or the new woman or whatever that situation is for your household. And sometimes what we end up doing, we take a step back or we take the back seat position and we just like, hey, would you like to go to the movies? Hey, would you like to go to McDonald's?
We're
the fun guy. We don't discipline. We don't do nothing. You can write on the walls. You can tear up the carpet. You can stay up all night, play the games or whatever.
That's not true.
And
that's not true.
But there are a lot of parents, step parents, that have taken that role because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to
step on anybody's toes or cause any friction. Well, one, you know what? Before I comment on that, relationships are hard enough as it is, And then you add your kids, my kids.
And them kids.
And and somebody else's kids all up in the mix. And you have this whole, this whole situation. And it's like, and then you add the baby mama and the baby daddy into the equation. And it's just like, wow, you have all these colliding things coming together. And it's like, how do you make all of that work? And I know we ended on that, as I said. But I was telling Regas and on our way up. But, I had that whole episode this week with baby daddy with my son's father. And, we talked a lot this week about it was more discipline with our son and how we talked and I felt like, hey, we on the same page about the whole situation about my son, some situations in school and whatnot, and end of semester and getting all his work in and just making all those things work. And, I think we're riding on the same page, get off the phone with him. Oh, okay. Then I called my son and we had talked about, his dad and I had talked about, taking some things away from him, taking video games away during the week, and you can only play on the weekends. And then I hear my son, he's all distracted. And I'm like, okay, is he playing video games? And I was like, his dad and I talked about not being on the game. So, I let it ride, didn't say anything. So my son jumps in the car the next morning and he's like, oh, I forgot. Such and such. Okay, well, why didn't you get your stuff together the night before? And I say something then about the video games. And I said, were you on the game? Yeah, his eyes got all big. And then automatically out of the kid's mouth is, but my dad said so. My dad said I could play. And then that, it just made me boil at that point where it's like, gosh, now, how do you handle that situation? One, I know we talked about last time not saying negative things about that other spouse to that child. How do I handle that without being like, oh, your dad get on my nerves?
Well, I can tell you if I can interject here, and we were talking about this. I think this is important because you cannot rule the roost in someone else's domain, in someone else's environment. You cannot do that. But what you can do is, yes, you're boiling over, frustrations are high, et cetera. And I always say cooler heads prevail. Take some time, drop the child off, the man cub to school or whatever, and then come back and then have a conversation once you calm down, once you're, not at, 105 degrees. Come down to a level where you can talk with him and don't start off the conversation with you. That's automatically defensive. They're going to defend their territory and just say, hey, you know what? I'm kind of feeling somewhat struck by what happened, and I'm going to give you the incidents, and I want to hear your take of it because I thought we had a conversation regarding X. Yeah. And I think sometimes when there is a rub or sometimes when there's something that has not gone as what we had planned for and anticipated, we start off the conversation wrong instead of starting off the conversation from an I point of view to basically state your claim, and then that other person, hopefully, if they have any couth, any type of wit about them, they're going to go, you know what, we did, and that was my bad, blah blah blah. But if you automatically attack the individual, they're going to put up all kinds of defensive mechanisms and all kinds of barriers where you guys are just going to be fighting. And guess what? That type of behavior from the child is going to be perpetuated or perpetrated. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. That type of behavior is going to continue. That's the word I want to look for. Is going to continue as they move into that environment. And so to your point, because I knew something was wrong with you, and I didn't know that till this morning. So I'm hot right now. That's why I can't even get my words out. No, I'm kidding. I knew something was going on with you because when I came in that evening and said, hey, what's going on, baby? You're like, nothing. And you're down on your phone, texting, whatever. And I'm like, I ain't stepping into nothing tonight. It's a long day. Something's going on. But when she's ready to come up out of that submarine, she put the periscope up. Hey, maybe she'll talk to me about it. If not, I'm not going to push it. But I knew something was going on there, which was okay. And I think sometimes as the supporting spouse of a child that is not yours, the best thing that you can do is just support. And sometimes support means sometimes just being quiet and just letting it, like you said, ride until you are in a position to talk about it. Because if we try to force it, it's going to spill over. The child's going to hear it, and they're going to be going, yeah, they were fighting and blah, blah, blah. It just turns into something where it doesn't really need to go. So I knew at that particular point in time that you were dealing with something. I didn't know what it was until this morning, until you told me. But I just said, I'm not stepping there. I said, I'm going to give my wife some space. This is an older episode that we talked about. You go back and find it. But giving your spouse some room so they can process that information, so they can get to a place where they can go, okay, I've got all the frustrations out. I can now talk to my spouse about it, my ex about it, and I can have an adult-like conversation.
So you're right. You absolutely did. And Regas did step back, and you may ask why I didn't say anything to Regas. And sometimes
I want to hear this.
You don't have to take every little thing to that step parent. There's things that you can handle, or if you feel like it's a big enough situation, then where you need to get that step parent involved, then do that. But to go back to the situation, you may ask, how did I handle it? How did I go about it? One, as Regas stated, I did calm down eventually, and I did send a text to my son's dad and let him know, one, we talked about something. You didn't hold your end of the bargain. And like Regas says, I'm not here to tell you how to rule your household, or you tell me how to, but with that step parents, you have to be on the same page, because you have that child that can come in there and they can play you. But like Regas says, it's like chess. You have to strategize and be 2 steps ahead of that child, where they know that you guys have that almost that oneness, and you have that agreement and that bond where they can't get stuff over on you. Because if you let those things come in where they see, oh, dad's gonna let me do this, mom's gonna let me do this, then I can come in and play the dozens.
They could become very manipulative.
And run all over you. But I let them know how I felt, and I left it alone. I didn't hear a response, so I don't know if it's good. But in that instance, I'm still going to do what I need to do in my household. I'm still going to tell Curdy and enforce those things in my household. And hopefully it starts to, spill over when he goes to his dad's house. Okay, well, mom said that, I'm not supposed to be on the game during the week. Then I'm going to be, mature enough to listen to her, or I'm going to step it up and do what I need to do so that I can be able to be on the game or whatnot, or do what I need to do.
Well, we talked about this, and I think this is very important, is, how do you raise that child in an environment where you don't get buy-in or you don't get agreement from the other parent, okay? And
where it's almost one-sided?
Yeah, it's almost one-sided. And you're trying to put all this good stuff into them, like, hey, how to be respectful and how to do their chores and making sure they're staying on top of their homework and making sure that they have balance between games and, schoolwork and all this other stuff. And then they go over to the other parent's house and it just all kind of falls apart. What do you do? And so what I would do if I was faced with that type of situation, thank God I wasn't. But what I would do is sit down with the child and just say, hey, look, you know what? I understand that, there are different set of circumstances or different set of rules and regulations at my house opposed to your father's house, etc. Totally understand that. However, and I'm not knocking what you do over at your father's house from the standpoint that, your dad is not a good dad. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get you to see things from a different perspective. And I'm trying to put some things in you that down the road, you may not understand all of the rules and regulations now and some of the boundaries that I'm trying to, put around you. But down the road, you will understand some of the things that I'm teaching you now that maybe you are not getting exposed to, or you're not getting taught at the other person's or at your other, parent's house. And I think sometimes if you sit down with the child and you explain things to that child as to why you do things, they get a better perspective and they get a better understanding, because sometimes it's weighted. You got to give them dimension and you got to give them context. Sometimes, because we live in a very information age. I mean, they teach children that it's like, get the information, get the information. So you just can't tell the child, I said no, and what I said is what I meant. Okay, I get that, but why? And I remember when I was growing up, to ask the question why would be myself picking myself up
Beat down.
over the coffee table. and it would just be a different situation, because it would be like, why are you questioning me? Now we live in an information age where kids are more inquisitive, they're more inquiring, they want to know, why are you telling me this when I see other things in different environments that say otherwise? And so when you give the child baseline and context, hopefully they're able to better understand where you're coming from, and they're able to digest those rules, regulations, boundaries. And then what ends up happening, and this is the hope, they carry that into the other environment.
But also, you have to remember, and this is just my opinion, that's why it's so important for those parents to put their differences aside and try to be on one page. Because as a child, kids have a lot that they're going and dealing with as well. So you have to think about, they're in this whole new environment with this whole new person. They may have siblings. They may have, new grandparents, all of that to play in a new environment that they're not happy in. And so it's the least that we could try to do is try to work with the other parent. So when they go to their house, that they don't have all these different rules, and then they have to try to remember, oh, what can I do at mom's house? What can I do at dad's house? And, for you to try and be on that one page, just try to make that whole transition as easy as possible for that child. Just,
Right.
To simplify it.
Yeah, and this is something that we spoke of. And,
I know that sounds
discussed.
easier said than done. But
Yeah, exactly. Well, and
that's
I think,
in a perfect world.
And I think what we said on our last podcast about this is always for the betterment of the child.
Yes.
And sometimes, like you said, when you don't put those differences away, those little, idiosyncrasies and those little things that you're still carrying, and let's face it, some parents that have children together and then they break up, some of them are still holding on to the past hurts when they were together with you. And they may be using the child as a pawn, or they may be using the child as to, hey, I'm going to put that stick in the cage, or whatever that is. And you have to be careful, and you have to rise above that and become very mature really quickly for the betterment of the child, because some parents are very vindictive as well. And they will use the child as, you know what, I know if I can get little Curdy, or if I know I can get little Susie to do something that she is diabolically against, I know to get under her skin. And they may be sitting back there on the couches having a good old time with that. And that's where you have to be, like I said, calculative. You have to be 3, 4, 5, even 10 steps ahead of the game and go, okay, I know where we're playing now. Because if you don't have that tempo between both, ex and spouse, and you guys cannot work together on the same sheet of music, you have to be strategic, because otherwise that child will be not only the death of your old relationship, could be the death of your new relationship.
Absolutely.
If you're not careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we don't want to beat that up too much. So.
No, we don't.
We don't want to beat that. I mean, we could go on and on with that. And
Yeah.
there's so many different scenarios with it, and everybody's scenario is different. But, just try to work that thing as best as possible, because I know that is one of the big factors in relationships.
I have a theory.
What's that?
I have a theory, and this is I'm going way out of bounds with this one, way out of bounds. But obviously, they say 50% of marriages, unfortunately, end in divorce. In divorce, and I was looking at some statistics, as I love numbers. And there was a statistic out there, hard cost numbers, that it says between 0 to 17, it costs $233,000 to raise a child. Could that be? No, I'm kidding. I need to split these costs and make sure. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, but I looked at that number and it's only growing. It's only growing. So I can only imagine. And that's a different episode, but it's just a little segue there. I can only imagine, these parents going, "My gosh, it's so expensive to raise a child."
It really is.
And if we look at that, that could be,
especially if you have a bougie child like mine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a different episode. That's definitely a different episode too as well. But I look at that and I really believe that could cause some pressure too, as well. In the household, with all the expense. My kid want to play basketball, football. He needs all the equipment. He needs all the gear. Now it's an extra expense for me to get him from this game to that game to this practice to that practice, and now it's parent night for me to bring the treats and all it goes on and on and on and on. And I think that pressure right there could just could be overwhelming, even for a step parent going, wait a minute, I need to put my foot down because now you bleed my pockets because they into yours and that's affecting my pockets. So we got to have a conversation. So I think the reason why I'm bringing all this up is it is so important when you have the blended family, and we talked about this on the way up, is that we need to come together to kind of establish what the new environment is going to look like for that child. Mm-hmm. I think that's important because if you're just shooting from the hip and you're just hot rodding it and hot dogging it and just, we just going to kind of flow with the, trust me, it can turn out disastrous. And so having a plan involved where you can sit down and talk about like, okay, what's the allocation cost for time? What's the allocation cost for expenses? How are we going to set up our environment? If I've got my children, you got your children, how are we going to bring the two, colliding things together, the two rivers together and all this other stuff? I think all of those things are important. And I think it needs to be established, not when you say I do and they throwing rice at you down the aisle, but I think it really needs to be established prior to getting into the relationship. Because as you know, it's going to be difficult after the I do without a plan, just as it's going to be difficult with a plan. So just think about it from that perspective. All you that are, ready to walk down the aisle and say I do, or, you're committed in a relationship, and now you're bringing in two sets of different children from two different sets of backgrounds and experiences and personalities. You got to have a plan around that.
Well, I know that we did that when we got married. So
we did? Okay.
No, I remember Regas sitting down, and Regas did really get under my skin when he said this, but it all played out. And we sat down and we looked at it and we talked about, as we stated earlier, Regas has kids and I have a son, but his kids are older. And so Curdy's in the household with us, and he was like, okay, what school is he going to go to? Because I was going way out of the way, running all around.
She's driving to Portland. I'm like, where is this boy going to school?
Hush, I'm talking right now.
Yes,
I'm talking right now. So, so he was like, okay, so what school is he going to go to? And I'm like, okay, he's going to go to this school. And he was like, no, you need to put him in a school in his school district. And I was like, well, no, this is what his dad and I talked about, and this is what we agreed about, and this is where he's going to do, and then he's going to do this, that, and the other. And Regas just was like, well, I think you need to reevaluate this thing. So, Regas is that numbers dude. He starts breaking down the wear and tear on the car, and he starts breaking down the gas and all of that stuff. And I'm like, I really don't want to hear all of that. It was just like, ugh. But as time went on, I began to see really what he was talking about and how it was really consuming, a lot of my time. And, after he said his piece, I said my piece, and we moved on, and he kind of stepped back. He didn't really try to force it. And he was like, okay, I'm just going to let it ride and see, how it pans out. I'm going to let you do what you want to do. But just in the back of your mind, have it where so as the time went on, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's taking up so much of my time to run him here, run him there, go to school here. And then I was like, so I was like, talked to his dad and was like, how about we move Curdy into his school district? and we checked out the school, and it all worked out, and those are the kinds of things. That's where the step parent plays in and rolls in,
Well, I'm
and
glad I could be of assistance there. And
you may not always agree with that step parent has to say, but hey, it's those things where you make those suggestions, and that's where he had to play a part in it, and where I was like, okay, well, we'll just see. So,
well,
but
I think as a step parenting is like playing double dutch. You got to know when to jump in and know when to jump out. Because if you jump in at the wrong time, boy, that rope's going to get you. You know what I'm saying? You pop, and all of a sudden, you got that welt on your shoulder or what have you, or on your forehead. But I've learned that in our relationship is that, like this week, I knew something was going on with you, and I jumped out. I was like, okay, I'm not going to force nothing. I'm not going to pull it out of you. I'm not going to drag it out of you. I'm not going to do the Fred Flintstone. You drag Wilma around the house, and I'm not doing that. But I knew something was going on, but I said, okay, give my spouse time, give my wife time for her to kind of calm down, perch herself, reevaluate what in the world is going on. And it worked out. And I think that's the role in a lot of respects of a step parent as you continue to evolve your relationship, is knowing when to jump in and to jump out, that double dutch thing. Because sometimes, you think I'm gonna jump in, and you get smacked with that rope. Well, it wasn't that, your timing was off. And I think so often our timing is off, even when we deal with our exes. Sometimes our timing is off, and sometimes we have good motive, but our tonality and our approach is incorrect. And so all of those things have to be taken in consideration when you're talking about trying to deal with the child, the betterment of the child.
Yes.
The overarching theme is always the betterment of the child. And sometimes, like you said, babe, put your differences aside. Because if you're not careful, you could be placing some deposits into that child that will hinder that child down the road because of the way you're acting today. So if we're not careful, we can set that child up for failure because we're still holding on to past hurts when we were together, right?
Yeah.
And now we can't work together because we're in, different domains, and we got different, people in our lives, people in our lives, and different spouses in our lives, et cetera. But at the same token, we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the betterment of that child.
So I know we talked about that a lot, and we just have a few more minutes left, but I just wanted to touch on a couple other things. We wanted to talk about on sibling rivalry. How come I couldn't say that? But yeah, let's touch on that real quick before we end. That can be an issue as well, but if you set those boundaries early in the relationship, and those things arise, and you let those kids know, hey, I know that you may have differences with them, but this is the house you're going to be in. And you won't have to work that thing out.
You may not be my child.
No, but on a serious note, you're going to have to deal with that in a different. Don't let those things, as we talked about, don't let those things sweep them under the rug and just let them be passive. No, deal with when issues arise with the kids. Make sure you're setting everybody down. Have a family night, family movie. You talk first, and then you have fun later. But just time where you can sit down and talk about your issues, about how everybody's feeling, if there's friction or tension, and then go to end that up to have some fun with each other and build that bonding time, that time where you can build that unity between the family and the siblings. Just have that time where, they can get to know each other, because there may be that some division in your household where it's your kids over here, his kids over here, and they're working against each other. But try to bring them together and sit down with them and have that family time and those family meetings where you can talk about the issues. And also with the spouses, don't let that be a division with you, because that can be an issue as well, where you're saying, okay, well, those are your kids and they acting a fool, but
yeah,
my kids over here, no. Come up with some type of solution and resolution, not those are your kids. No, they're they're all of our kids, and we're trying to make this thing work together. So.
Exactly. Well said. And one of the things I will say as we get ready to conclude here about that is setting up the environment the way you want your environment to, operate. Respect the child respects you. Like I said, have game, bring it together, come up with something that's going to work for your household, etc. And your homework assignment is going to be watching the Brady Bunch as on MeTV, watch the Brady Bunch, watch how they deal with conflict, etc. I know that's kind of, that's flowery, whatever, and that's TV world, but you can definitely learn a lot from watching that show, how they dealt with some of the rivalries and the siblings and all of that other stuff, et cetera. And, it's kind of old school, but you can use old school methodology and put it into today's world and put
reality.
a little twist and spin on it. So with that being said, there's a couple announcements.
I have an announcement. One is next week is Valentine's Day weekend. And if you have not gotten your significant other a gift, stop on by the Melanated Market. We will be there the 13th and the 14th, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Check us out. There will be some amazing vendors there. Come out and support small businesses, and also bring a donation. We're doing poppable food cans and a unused sock drive.
All right. So you heard it there. Next weekend, 13th and 14th, Valentine's Day weekend, President's Weekend. Come on out to the Melanated Market. Hopefully you've learned something today. We had a great conversation. I enjoyed it. And you know what? Blend those families. Use harmony. Use wit. Use wisdom. Like they said, come up with some resolutions for your own family, some solutions there, etc. We are so glad that you joined in today. And always, to my good friends over here at BD Local, always want to give them a shout out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so with that being said, we are
Rect and certified. See ya.
Take care.